Hi, everybody. This is Robbie from Miscellaneous Candor, frank, honest, and otherwise outspoken. This episode is a little bit late this week. We were hoping that Stephen would be back this week, but we need to give him one more week so we can be 150% when he comes back. But in the meantime, we did not want to leave you hanging. Um, so I know I had recorded a solo pod maybe about a week and a half ago, so this will too be a solo pod. A lot, I mean, to say the least, in terms of when this is being recorded, a lot has happened. That's an understatement. But first and foremost, let me talk a little bit about some of the podcasts that I've listened to that are different. So, I listened to a Joe Rogan podcast recently. And he actually had this gentleman on his podcast named Daryl. Let me just get the actual name here. I want to just talk about this a little bit more, but he had what's his name? Daryl Davis and Jeff Shope or Shoop or something like that. Anyway, Jeff Shoop used to be in the neo-Nazis, people, and Daryl Davis is black, African American, depending on what you want to say. And he is just a guy who talks to people, anyone, and he seems to, for some reason, be able to convince people who are in these neo-Nazi parties to leave. And I thought it was very interesting because there's been a lot of conversation about Joe Rogan, the whole right-wing perspective and where he stands, and is he hardcore MAGA in terms of just some of the things that have been coming out, just in terms particularly about without saying it, people are not coming out and saying it, but people are hinting that he may not be somebody who's just open to talking to everybody, basically. And I think this episode demonstrates that that is not the case. It was really, really an interesting episode. And ironically, the guy who used to be in the neo-Nazi party and now is out, and he and Daryl are close friends. He now works for the Rosenthal Foundation or something of that sort. But it was a pretty interesting episode. They go deep. They talk about why he got involved, and it's not an episode where there's a lot of like vitriol and you know kind of over the top language. It really is a conversation about what this person went through, why he ended up there, and why he decided to leave, and how he really sees people for essentially who they are now, and how they interact and what their values and their character and their base of foundation is versus just having a stereotype about them. Um, so I think it's a pretty interesting episode. Um, then I listened to, I don't know if you know the Pivot podcast, not the one with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway, which you all know we listen to here, particularly me, but the other Pivot podcast, the sports podcast. I think actually this Pivot podcast was the first one. Like it was the first one. It's called The Pivot. But if you look at it in Apple or Spotify or whatever you listen to, it's called Pivot Podcast, and it's with people who used to be in the NFL: Ryan Clark, Fred Taylor, and Channing Crowder. So you probably, maybe some of you know who Boris Kojo is, but personally, I love Boris Kojo and his wife Nicole. And he was on there, and he was just talking about what it was like for him growing up in Germany and then coming over here and becoming an actor, or actually a model first, then becoming an actor, and just the mindset that he had and how he had to navigate and change and adjust. And it's interesting. And then also too, because his father left him when he was young, how sports became such a huge part of who he is. They also talked about um, the fact that this particular podcast creates a space, particularly for Black men to be able to be vulnerable and just talk and be real about their feelings and sometimes, go hard on their emotions, etc. And there's not like a lot of places where that is the case. So I thought that was an interesting podcast, and I'm talking about it because I'm going to pivot, of course, to so even though Steven is not on the podcast, he has been sending me things while he is recovering. And one of the images that he sent me was an image of Diddy in the yard in his new prison talking to people. So I think you all know that Diddy was convicted. Then we talked about the fact that yes, I am transitioning from the podcast over to Diddy. So we talked about the fact that perhaps Donald Trump was going to um pardon him. Okay, so Donald Trump didn't pardon him, right? He was like, I'm staying away from that. No, sorry, Puff. No, it's not happening, right? So he's not going to be in there now until like, I think it's January of 2028, something like that. Or no, I'm sorry, May of 2028, something like that. So yeah, he's in it. He's in it now. So they moved him from prison. Someone tried to stab him in MDC where he was before. Now he's in another place. So I personally think because since we're doing the whole gossip thing and we've talked about this, how much 50 Cent trolls Diddy, and 50 Cent is close with Trump, and he actually called him at one point during the trial. This is all out there in the public sphere. Called him in during the trial and actually said, you need to leave him alone. Don't mess with him, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if that had any influence, but Diddy is not going to be able to buy his way out of prison. So I don't know. Maybe this really is it. Like this is done. Like we're done. We're not talking about this until he gets released in 2028. Hopefully he can do the time, and there's that. Okay. So some of the other things that have just been, I'm going to get to AI, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. Obviously, I think I would be remiss if I did not mention everything that happened on election night, November 4th. Um, Lots of women winning mayoral seats across the country. Lots of women governor. I guess like 12 states now have women governors. Um, but I do think one of the things I will say that the two women who were elected on November 4th um, for New Jersey and Virginia, both of them had backgrounds in the military. Both of them were very like in the center. They weren't too far one way or the other. And they didn't really focus on the fact that they were women. Now, some people are like, yeah, that's good. I mean, honestly, sometimes I'm just like, why does it even matter? Like, okay, you say you're a woman, you don't say you're a woman. Why should that even matter to somebody? If you say it or if you don't. But I don't know what the big deal is about saying it. But yeah, a lot about that happening right now. Anyway, that being said, they won. They won on their merit and they won on talking about the things that are impacting people. So now let's see if they can really make a change. Prop 50 passed in California by quite a large margin. Evidently, one in what's like I don't know. I want to say 3 and 4. It was pretty large. It was 60, almost 70% of people voted for that, and that will allow at least. And this is, I will say this, it's supposed to allow for California to redistrict the 5 seats to take up the 5 seats that were redistricted in the state of Texas when there was a phone call made that, yeah, I need 5 seats. Okay, they did it. And, they just did it without the people. So California decided to do a vote. The people voted for it. And then they're going to redistrict 5 seats. One of the things people may not know is that California could have done more, but decided just to keep it with the 5 seats. So now there's a push for all this other stuff to happen. Um, and then Mamdani won the mayoral race in New York City, and there's a lot of controversy about that. I mean, there's some people who are super happy about it, and there's some people who are not. Personally, I mean, historically speaking, we can look, socialism does not work. And that's my stance on it. That's kind of how I feel. Um, it's a great idea, but it doesn't work. And we've seen multiple scenarios where it is a great idea and then it ends up breeding even more corruptions and chaos. So there's that part. Um, I don't know what's going to happen. I think we have to see what's going to happen. I think we want to hope that it will be okay and that New York won't, because some people have, are catastrophizing and are scared and concerned. And then other people are like, okay, this is going to be a huge change. If you hear a dog barking, yes, that's my dog. Um, but if you don't hear a dog barking, that means I was able to remove the bark from the recording. Um, so yeah, it should be interesting to see what happens. I think no one wants New York to just like be so shifted that people feel like they don't feel safe there. But also, there's a huge affordability problem, right? And I think that's why he won. Like, it's just I was listening to something and they were talking about how people who, are just starting off and living in New York, they can't even buy like a drink if they go out. They do this thing where they'll buy one drink and then the bartender will split it between like 3 or 4 people so that they can like have a drink and sit there and, do it because it's so expensive. Anyway, um, so that's just like one example, but we will see. I don't know how easy it's going to be to implement all of the things that were promised. So, personally, I think that's going to be a little bit difficult, but I think we'll have to see how everything works out. Definitely not rooting for the demise, but I would be remiss to say that I think that this approach is the best one. I don't. I've been pretty clear that I'm a capitalist and I believe in free markets. Okay, so let's move on to AI. There's been so much about AI recently, just in terms of even people talking about how AI is holding up the economy, right? How so many companies are embedded or flowing through NVIDIA, OpenAI, and a few other companies. Um, it's like you just hear about it every day. Amazon let go of 14,000 workers, said that they're probably going to let go of 30,000 workers. First, it was reported that it was because they were replacing people with AI, but then we find out that it's really not that. It's that they're going to use the money for the people who are laid off to buy more chips and data so that they can continue to build the AI capacity within the organization. Um, then there's some other things that just recently came out. I think that people, and then, there's AI slop and there's AI this and there's just AI, right? I bet people now have AI fatigue. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, sometimes I have AI fatigue. Um, so I think that that's happening a lot. And I just want to say again, this is just my opinion, for what it's worth on our small little podcast here. If you have AI fatigue, that's okay. Take a breath. Don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel like you need to learn everything. Maybe try to learn 1 or 2 things at a time outside of ChatGPT so you can understand what it means and maybe how it can help your job. I think it's in one of the things I thought was interesting too. They said that about 40 to 45% of data that's going into OpenAI in like personal stuff is from people's work. So people are copying their work information, which is proprietary because they have enterprise AI solutions into these personal ones. So there's that part. So people are using it, but they're not using it maybe the most ethical way. But yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But I would just say maybe try to focus on 1 or 2 things. Don't feel overwhelmed by it. Yes, you should know it though. Like I think that if people, again, I've said this multiple times, you can't put your head in the sand with this. You just can't. Um, but it is quite a lot. There's some tools out there. Um, there's some people like there's Cursive that has like a whole set of tools that you can learn outside of OpenAI. There's a few people that have some good tools to follow. Cliff Worley has one. If you know who he is, he's been doing AI tools for quite some time. Follow some newsletters, maybe on LinkedIn if you're on LinkedIn. Look at some things on the on even if you or social media, etc. You can follow AI things, but I would follow kind of the more um, structured or um, established sort of organization, so you can get those that type of news, etc. Um, the other thing I think is interesting is they're talking about how a lot of hospitals are testing medical assistants and utilizing robots. So robots are the thing that people are talking about, but they're not talking about it the way they're talking about AI, and they're really growing. Like there's a lot going on with robots. Now, some of these robots that they have out there, they're talking about how robots soon are going to be in your house, and you can have robots like doing your housework, and robots doing this, and robots doing that. We're not there yet. There were robot Olympics and sporting events. I think I talked about that on one episode. Um, and Elon was talking about how they're going to focus on the hand because the hand is the hardest part in terms of really optimizing, the Optimus robot. Um, so it's gonna be interesting to see. They're talking about too that in the long term that's gonna be a thing for Amazon. We see Waymo out there in terms of the robotic cars, right? The driverless cars, those are robots essentially with AI, driverless cars. So robots are something too, I think that if you have AI fatigue, but you still want to keep up with technology and what's going on, start following the robotics if you haven't already. People are talking about it more, but it's definitely not out there as much. Um, what else did I want to talk about? Let me see. Let's see if Steven sent me anything that we can talk about. I'm gonna look at my texts and see if there's anything here that I'm missing that maybe he might have sent. Oh, I'm just looking at these Diddy pictures. This is funny. Um, oh, he talked about the Amazon layoff, so I did catch that. If you're listening, Steven, I talked about the things that you sent. And yes, we definitely miss you. Um, let's see. I'm saying a lot. I usually don't do that on the podcast, but hey, it's been a long day, guys. It's been a long day. Let's see here. I want to see if there's anything else that he sent. Oh, he sent some things, he and his extreme sick. So he sent this thing about JD Vance, you know how Steven is. So I'm speaking on behalf of Steven right now. How he talked about even though he's married to his wife, he hopes that she will see the error of her ways. So his wife is not Christian. JD Vance is Christian, right? His wife is Indian. Not sure she's Hindu or not. I think she goes to church with him, but he is hoping that she will see the errors of his ways. I mean, anyway, the fact that someone could say that, if those are the actual words, because this is a post on Instagram, so sometimes you don't know if it's real or not anymore. That's another thing. Take a lot of these things with a grain of salt these days, people. A lot of things are ads, a lot of things are fake, a lot of things are just not real anymore. Things can it's so hard to tell. Um, oh, I want to go back to a podcast that I listened to. Um, I listened to Ezra Klein. I don't know if you know who he is. So he has a Times podcast from the New York Times. We always give credit for people here. And he's been getting a lot of slack because people are saying from the left, actually, that he's going too far right or too far center, whatever the heck that means. But he's just having conversations. And there was a really good conversation. I really think I want to read this book, people. I think if you do want to start digging in a little bit deeper, and people always say do your research, educate yourself. There's this book that this woman wrote, on the Ezra Klein show, and he's talking to her about it. And essentially, she's I think, a professor from Cornell University, and her name is, let's see here, boom, 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 Suzanne Mettler. And she's a professor at Cornell University. And so she wrote this book about the rural and the urban divide in America. And I think we know that exists, but she talks about when it started. And it actually started a lot, like within the last maybe 10, 20 years, right? Last 10 years really gotten bad, but like 20 years. So it hasn't happened that long. So actually the country really was more unified. And this was after civil rights, after the 1950s, like we've been talking about, going all the way back to the 1950s. That's when things were. But no, that's not true. That's not true. We were together after that. Maybe up until like about the end of the 1990s when all of this starts. So I think she talks about it in so much depth. I don't want to give away a lot of things, but a lot of this had to do with, specific things that were passed by Democrats and Republicans that specifically hurt rural people. And I don't think that we recognize that rural people initially were Democrats, which is why there would be times when Democrats would win, but that is so hard pressed to find now. So I think I want to read the book. The book is called, let's see, what is the book called? Rural versus Urban, the Growing Divide That Threatens Democracy. And, I think we all talk about this as United States of America. Um, so this is a book that talks about how we're dividing and also to what we maybe can do to bring us back a little bit closer together. Um, I think that's one of the great things about this whole experiment called America is that we didn't all have to disagree. We could still live together and be okay. And we seem sometimes to be moving away from that. There are people who are not. Oh, I didn't talk about the SNAP benefits. Yeah, there's that. So we know that the SNAP benefits have been um, stopped and stalled due to the government shutdown. And I hate that kids are being punished for this. I know some people feel like it's one side's fault and the other people feel like it's another side's fault, but I'm not focusing on that. I've been, focusing on what we can do. Personally, I did something. I gave some food to food bank. My mom and I, we went shopping together. She wanted to do it too, so we went grocery shopping, and we've been giving things away to people. Um, even though we don't have a lot, but that's really not the point. The idea that someone just can't eat is just unfathomable to me. Um, and giving and is a form of tithing, which is a really strong part of my Christian values and faith. So, this is just what I should have probably been doing before this, if I'm honest with myself. So I'm going to figure out how I can continue to do this. I used to do this more, but I need to do it more. So if you can, and if you want to help people, and there's this artificial idea out there that people are using SNAP benefits to buy, I don't know, crazy things. And it's so like stereotypical, but I think Americans get that is like that's not true. Like you can't buy non-food items with that. Like it's not possible. Um so, and everybody is affected by this. It's 42 million people. So cross ages, backgrounds, demographics, all of that stuff, male, female, etc. all across the country, variety of different states. So donate if you can. Um, if you can't, maybe, volunteer. If you are here, I mean, just a little bit to help so that people can eat. Um, what else? Oh, just today. I realize it's today. I don't know if it's today. No, it's not today, but that's not the point. So evidently flights are starting this Friday. Flights are going to be cut like 40% or something crazy like that. 10% maybe. Maybe it's between 10 and 40. I know that's a big delta, right? Okay. I'll have to look it up. You can look it up too. Um, because of the air traffic controllers. So they're just not coming in. So we really got to figure this out and open up the government. We got to open up the government. This is just hurting too many people outside of the tariffs and, you know, the trade agreements with people not being able to sell their goods to people. It's just everything it's a lot right now. And so I'm just asking you all to pray for everyone and to be grateful for what we all have. So I think that's really all I wanted to say. A little bit more. I think I was a little bit more focused this week than I was that first week when Stephen wasn't here. But as always, thank you for listening. As I mentioned, Stephen will be back next week. We will have one. Let's hope that he is. But if not, I will come back. Please leave any comments, likes, etc. Feel free to reach out. And that is it, everyone. All right. Until next time. See you later.